Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack here. Monday now, the 17th of February, 2025. The main portion of today's update, cold and stormy. Look at that graphic there, a little piece of the old polar vortex making its way back down into the lower 48. We have extreme cold draining down into the country, and with that, it's going to be stormy. It's already been stormy. We're going to take a look back a little bit at some of the storminess we've had in recent days. Then we're going to look ahead to the upcoming system and why we are not going to have a big East Coast blizzard, snowstorm, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be relegated, I think, maybe just to the Outer Banks of North Carolina and perhaps the Tidewater of Virginia. What a drastic change in just the last several days, and I'll explain to the best of my ability why that has been the case. Where did those changes come from? And some of the limitations of the models. Also, the little footnote at the bottom there, the subtitle, if you will. We'll take a little quick look at the upcoming hurricane season, some of those big puzzle pieces that I like to keep an eye on, and then kind of a new concept that I want to, at least for me, new-ish, kind of present to you a different way to look at things as we approach hurricane season. All right? Great to have you joining in with me. Let's get started. First, let's go back in time just a little bit. Last week, I was up in the D.C. area along the I-95 corridor from Fredericksburg up to Silver Spring, back and forth there, ended up in the D.C. metro area. And I took the 360 cams with me, and I just want to show you how neat this is. Very immersive, just really a different way to show you the weather. This is at a little park. I think this is near Woodbridge or something. Yeah, Woodbridge Park's what it says in the title. And it's just really cool what we can do with 360 video. And a lot of this is helping to get me better at it, so to speak, for the upcoming severe weather season. Hey, there's my Tacoma over there. And eventually hurricane season, because there's a lot that we can do with 360 video during other weather rather than just sticking it in a park somewhere, the camera that is. It's just practice time. And these events really help me to do just that. You can freeze the video. Look at that aggregate right there. See, that's the thing. You can start picking out stuff in the video that is meteorologically interesting, maybe aesthetically pleasing, whatever. And these are some big snowflake aggregates, and that is where a bunch of snowflakes come together. And I don't know, it's just thought I'd share this with you. I'm a big fan of this 360 video stuff. It's not just for people that have VR headsets, because clearly you can operate it in the YouTube 360 player. This is another example when I was over at the Washington Monument area, part of the National Mall, and I put the camera under a tree. I don't know what kind of tree this is, but obviously the leaves are gone because it's the middle of winter, and it's just really neat. And I'm going to put the links to these, and you can certainly look up these titles. That's fine with me. They are not public just yet. They're pretty short. And I'm not going to monetize them either. You can just watch them, no ads. But listen to the sound. It's just amazing. The sound is even in 360. You can see the glistening of the snow, people walking around. There's yours truly over there. And so it's just a cool, different way. Oh, look, you can actually look up. And if you ever stand close to the monument, you really got to look up at that thing. It's tall. And the 360 video allows us to do that with ease. Finally, driving around Washington, D.C. in a snowstorm, why not? I put the 360 cam on top of my Tacoma and drove it around. There's our exterior cam. We're going to use that during hail season. It's really good when it's stationary. The hail guard that's on here, that's what this contraption is going all along here. That's a little bit wobbly, and I guess it's meant to flex a little bit, and it makes the camera very wobbly, but that's why we test. And I just thought this was a neat way to show you DC. I'm driving up, actually not real far from the White House in this particular shot. You can see people walking around. It's like you're sitting up there. And then look, I know immersive video like this has been around for many years. I just think there's utility to it. Look, you can even, I don't know if it'll let me zoom in. Maybe I got to go full screen to zoom in. Yeah, you can zoom in so you can back out of seeing the Tacoma, for example. And it doesn't give you the best resolution. It's shot in 8K. It does it in 4K here on the YouTube. I don't know why it won't play 8K, but whatever. I just thought it's a neat thing, and I figured I would share it with you. Again, I'm going to put the links to these in today's video description if you want to watch them yourselves. Have at it. It's really neat. All right. One thing I want to bring up too, you remember a few days ago we had the high risk of flooding. Hopefully you're paying attention to that for parts of Tennessee and Kentucky, and it has indeed come to pass. We've had a lot of flooding rain up through this area. This is off the Fox Weather Twitter page, and this is some drone video that they acquired, and that's all the flooding up there. And it's Kentucky, again, another example of how we have to take water that falls from the sky much more seriously. We get so fixated, and I understand it, I get it, on tornadoes and hurricanes and wind and kind of the stuff you see with your eyes that's happening right in front of you. This happens after all of that. It's very rare that you get a lot of flooding. You get flash flooding, yes, but this kind of flooding happens after that weather has come and gone. Rivers and streams and creeks, they rise, and it takes some time. Now, yeah, you do have the day of type of events like what we saw with Helene along the Swananoa, for example, or the Tow River, and many other examples in western North Carolina. But, we got to just think differently about the weather. Maybe I can buy that moniker for cheap from Apple. Remember, think different? We have to think. I don't think they'll sell it to me even if I had the money, right? But seriously, this is the result of too much rainfall in different locations in too short a period of time, and we just have to pay more attention to that. That's the best advice I can give, because we do have the tools to see it coming, and then we do have some tools to mitigate, like our friends from QuickDam and other prevention measures. We call that mitigation. But I just wanted to show that to you, that high risk of flooding was something like in this area, if I'm not mistaken, and it did indeed come to fruition. And now, part of those same areas are under the gun from winter weather, winter storm warning now in western Tennessee, and that's part of the overall very cold air, that lobe of that polar vortex, the tropospheric, stratospheric, whatever you want to call it, polar vortex, starting to dip down into the lower 48 again. It's going to kind of rotate through, and it's just a lobe of it. And it is a real thing, by the way. I know the media liked, whenever that term really came, I don't remember what year it was that really jumped out into the jargon, but you do have this large area rotating around over near the North Pole, and these pieces of it will come down, maybe they even break off, and then they swing through, and luckily they are fairly transitory. But while they're here, you get these blues in here, and that's your extreme cold warnings all the way down into deep Texas there. And this is the kind of cold that can affect cattle. It can affect the ability for the energy system to maintain itself. We saw that in 2021. This is a big deal. It's impacting a lot of people. We already had one storm system come across that brought the severe weather. Luckily, not too many tornadoes, but we did have severe weather in parts of the deep south. With that storm system flooding in California, we broke the rainfall drought. In Vegas, finally, we've had a lot of mountain snow out here in the Sierras and elsewhere. I'll actually show you that on the satellite view in a minute. But when I look at this, I think, man, it is a very active pattern coming up for sure. All right? And I want to show you this. This jumped out at me from the algorithm side of the Twitter there. This is Mount Washington. And just look, I like extreme weather, studying it. I don't like what it does to people, but that's part of what I do. By hopefully shedding light on what severe weather is capable of, more people will take it seriously and appreciate it, respect it, and hopefully save their lives first and foremost, and hopefully save their property as well, right? And so, that being said, when I see this, I'm out. It's not happening. Now, this is a little while ago here, 12:15 that this got posted. It's about 2 hours old, but no, 128 gusting to 144 with a wind chill of minus 60. That's where I draw the line. Actually, way before that, but I'd show you that. That showed up, like I said, in my Twitter feed. I was like, wow. I figured I'd show it to you guys. All right. So here is the satellite animation this afternoon. A few interesting things to point out. First of all, you can see out west beautiful snowpack here in the Sierras, down in parts of the Wasatch and elsewhere in Utah. There is some good snowpack up here too in the Cascades and the Olympics and the Rockies, some good snowpack, and that's important. That's White Sands, New Mexico, by the way. The snowpack's important because the spring snowmelt will bring more water that drains down, especially from Colorado here, eventually ending up into the Colorado River Basin and spilling its way into the Gulf of California. Yeah, it matters. If it rains, this is interesting, it can rain all at once out here, and unless it's raining right on Lake Mead and Lake Powell, they don't fill up. You know, they get fed, I know Lake Mead does, from the Colorado River Basin, and that gets fed from the Rockies. But anyway, we're not necessarily doing a hydrometeorological, geologic, geographic lesson here, but I like to throw in things like that when they present themselves. A lot of snowpack elsewhere across mainly the northern half of the country. Due to the very warm Gulf, we have basically had not much since the big-time snow coming up on about a month ago. And I'll show you that Gulf in just a minute. It has really rebounded. All right, now on to where we are in the setup that's coming. We were looking at a big midweek storm that a lot of people were getting amped up about for various reasons. And that really doesn't seem like it's going to be the case now. We're not going to have as big of a storm system for the East Coast. And I got a lot of stuff to put into today's description. I'll put a link to this thread from Eric if you want to read it. It's really fascinating as to why this isn't going to happen. And then it's even now starting to come down to, like, you know, the last couple minutes of a game kind of deal, that even in North Carolina and Virginia, we're talking about, you know, tens of miles being the difference between an inch or two of sleet, which is horrible. That just sounds terrible. Or 6 to 12 inches of snow. And this is a really tricky forecast overall. So what happened? Well, let's go over to Pivotal Weather. This, and I use Pivotal. I'm actually using it more and more. Nothing against Tropical Tidbits at all. Been a big fan of that site and Dr. Cowan's work for many, many years, as a lot of us have. But for whatever reason, the European data from the ECMWF gets rendered out at Pivotal Weather much sooner than it does over at Tropical Tidbits. So today I'm going to show you the Euro, and I'm going to pick on the Euro just a little bit, but I want to have a little caveat in there, and I'll throw that in at the end, all right? So this is the Euro way back last Thursday night into Friday. So Thursday night into Friday of last week, so there's your initialization of it, right? So the 0Z on the 14th, overnight, Thursday night into Friday. And, of course, we are looking at the lower 48, or what we call the CONUS. And let me just outline it for you, just so you know. Around the Gulf Coast states, up the East Coast, and Canada, of course, way up here. So this is what the Euro was showing. We all remember this, but I'm going to show you just to remind you. It brought that energy south with the old polar vortex, created a surface low with the upper level energy phasing, and bam! We had ourselves, or so we thought, quite the winter storm that was going to manifest itself here. I'll just let the loop play. We'll run it real fast over and over. We were thinking, oh yeah, we are going to get hammered here in the east with quite a big winter storm. There was the first one. There comes the second one. And I'll just do this frame by frame. I mean, look at this. From the interior portions of Virginia up through the Delmarva region. I got it right that time. Outside of the DMV, right? Somebody out there watching knows exactly what I'm talking about. Anyway, it looked like a heck of a storm up the I-95 corridor, even scraping New England to some extent, and then on out to sea from there. Since then, however, it has kind of not been the case. Let me just back this up, and we'll go to the current run for today, and this, in fact, is going to be what we end up with here, a much flatter suppressed system on the Euro here. This is the Euro, the 12Z Euro from today. There is our system out there, not nearly doing as much as we were thinking it could do a few days ago. We'll go back a little bit here. So certainly the cold and the snow in the nation's midsection, almost blizzard conditions in northeast Oklahoma, possibly. But then that swings through, and the difference is really the amount of upper level energy and how everything came together. But here's that caveat. I'm not trying to pick on the model. I mean, what do they care about what I say anyway, right? But that was 150 hours ago that we first really started seeing this, and even longer than that if you go back to other runs. That is still incredibly far out in time, even for the Euro, which many regard, rightfully so, as usually a very reliable computer model. But this is coarse data. Okay, this is like a bunch of rocks in a jar. You ever seen that experiment? We're talking about the different coarseness of things. You have a bunch of rocks, and then you put smaller rocks in, and they filter through, and you finally put sand in, and the sand can fill in all the different pieces, all the dead space, right? So that's what these models are. The global models are the more coarse rocks in that jar. And then the closer you get, you start adding that fine sand that fills in the dead space. The dead space, in this analogy, is the missing data of time. Because the closer you get, the more resolution is, the more the resolution that we have becomes reliable. And so the enemy here is time. When you look at something that far out, it just doesn't work that well when you're trying to resolve individual storm systems and whether or not they're going to phase with these different complex areas of energy in the atmosphere. And the same thing holds true with hurricanes during hurricane season, right? So we're still going to get a good snowstorm. It's just not going to be for the I-95 corridor. It doesn't appear at this time, and we're pretty close now. It'd be an incredible miss if all of a sudden we went back to having what we were looking at 150 hours ago or whatever. So that being said, let me show you. I did want to pull up the snow forecast. I don't use Pivotal a lot, so bear with me here. Let's go back to this. And we'll get on to the, I want to go local, sorry. Regional, there we go. So let's take a look at the snow cover. Let's take this out to 4 days, and then we'll look at the total predicted snow from the Euro here. And I know it's in here somewhere, winter weather. I know everybody's screaming, you go down here, you go there. Snowfall, there we go. So here, it's really confined on the latest Euro, mostly to the coastal plain of North Carolina. Some back, to the west from there along the Highway 64 corridor and extreme southeast Virginia. And you mouse over. That's one cool thing about this. You can mouse over and get spot measurements or predictions of measurements, if you will. But this is a far cry from having this up the coast like that, which is what we were thinking could be a possibility, as I've already gone over several days ago. So we'll see. Is this going to shift south even more? It could. And then you get places like Rodanthe in here. You could get some serious snow, maybe all the way down to Hatteras over here, Frisco and Buxton. We'll see. It's been a weird winter for this kind of stuff. All right. So before I jump over to the hurricane season part, so I will be going out tomorrow night. I mean, come on, I live right down here in Wilmington, and we're 3 hours away from the good snow. So yes, tomorrow evening I'll head up to somewhere and get out there and cover it. It's really interesting out in eastern North Carolina when you get a big snowstorm like this, or southeast Virginia. It's just very flat out there, and the wind blows pretty good. Anyway, it could be an interesting event. So yes, I will be out there covering it. Probably put up a couple of cameras and get the old drone ready for some great flyovers of snow-covered fields and whatever. We'll just have to wait and see. But yes, I will be out there covering it. Now, looking ahead to hurricane season, and this does affect current weather as well, this is one of the big puzzle pieces that I especially have been keeping an eye on for as long as I can remember. Many years of looking at anomalies, because sea surface temperatures are the reason that we have hurricanes. If we did not have warm oceans, usually 80 degrees or higher, we wouldn't have hurricanes. And by the way, Dr. Neil Frank once said if we didn't have hurricanes, we would probably have something worse, because they are nature's way of kind of bleeding off some of that heat that gets built up, usually down in the tropics. Sometimes in the subtropics, you can get these cyclones moving in the subtropical areas of our planet. But this particular shot here, this is updated every day. It's always a day behind. Shows a few interesting things. First of all, our La Nina is starting to erode away down here. We're moderating this towards a little bit warmer. We're nowhere near an El Nino, but we're definitely chiseling away there at that La Nina signature in the equatorial Pacific. So that'll be something to watch. We still have, by and large, this horseshoe shape of anomalous warmth in the Atlantic, but a big difference between now and the last couple of years, this is not exceptionally warm relative to average like we have seen 23, 24, those two seasons. I almost said 25, but that's where we are now, obviously. So a few different changes, but overall the background state still suggests an active versus inactive season. And I think that's what matters the most. Now, obviously, it comes down, and that's what I'm going to show you towards the end of today's update, this new sort of paradigm shift that I'm going to try to steer my audience toward. We'll get there. I'll show you. But, it just doesn't look like we're going to have something to come along and really cut those numbers down. And the numbers matter, but they also don't matter. Obviously, it's the old, it only takes one. That's the number that really matters for you. Does it impact you? I can't answer that right now. But looking at the overall global pattern, it still looks favorable today for what would be an active season if this stays or doesn't change drastically. Well, we'll have to see about that. Now, one thing that's really interesting, this is way back, I like saying that, because in the weather, even a week before or after an event is a long time in terms of data and all the changes that can happen. So this is the Gulf of Mexico when we had the big snow. And I remember Matt Devitt, I talked about this in my last update, I think, mentioned the Eastern Gulf had cooled off substantially. He did a tweet about it. And yes, that was really, really remarkable. That very cold air mass that came down cooled off the Gulf out to the southwest Atlantic. And, we were like, oh, yay, finally. And then the big southeast ridge came back, and there you go. That is truly remarkable. Come on, you got to admit. That's January 22nd. That's yesterday. What a turnaround. And again, I think it's that very warm water getting injected into the Gulf from the Caribbean, and it just kind of gets trapped in here, and boom, it goes right back up. Now, as I've also said many times, this region will be plenty warm for hurricanes from June 1st on. That's almost never going to be in question. These anomalies are more important now for winter storms sliding across like this. They pick up that Gulf moisture. And then eventually, when we open up Tornado Alley up here in the springtime, we'll just have to see. There's also other patterns that can influence it. But normally you get this nice high pressure sitting out here, and the clockwise flow around that, we get what we call return flow, and those southerly to southwesterly winds eventually, and that seeds this whole area with deep moisture. And that is important for our winter and spring weather pattern across here. But in hurricane season, you bet the Gulf will always be warm enough to support intense hurricanes, and we just have to remember that. All right? So where do we see things going? Again, this is the state of the sea surface temperature anomalies now. Well, a quick look over at the Columbia Climate School at their IRI for Climate and Society. They have an ENSO forecast. They work with the CPC, Climate Prediction Center, and we get some beautiful output graphics. Very easy to interpret, at least I think so. A good old bar graph, generally speaking, the odds as of now of El Nino, and El Nino is the hurricane killer, so to speak. It thwarts the development. We know that. Odds are, as of now, this is January, February data, 20% chance of an El Nino. Neutral being the most likely so far. Now that's September, October, November. The peak of the season, and this is important, I'm glad I caught it before I went on forward. The peak season is right here, August, September, October, and the chance for El Nino is even lower in that time frame. In fact, they give you a nice table here, only 17%. So we'll see. This will change. These data will change. Remember, data is the plural of datum, right? So this is an interesting way to look at it. There's also the different plots over here, and you run the gamut from the very, very warm BCC, BCC, whatever that is, which is very warm, The rest of the dynamical and the statistical modeling, I'll just draw it in for you, really keeping it, there's neutral right down the middle, slightly cooler than neutral. Neutral, of course, is a big fat zero. Your anomaly is neither positive or negative. It's zero. It's nothing. It's neutral. Most of the guidance indicating cool, neutral overall. So we'll watch this about once a month. So let's check this again sometime in mid to late March. All right. Last thing I want to show you, and this is where I'm really going to be trying to steer my crowd toward, is impacts over numbers. I think, and that'd make a great t-shirt. Everybody like, what does that mean? Maybe it wouldn't make a great t-shirt. I like phrases like that we can hang our hats on and dig into. The numbers are relevant. They are. They are even sometimes, bear with me here, exciting. Okay, even just by definition. Exciting doesn't always mean good. If an elephant charged through the door into my office, it would be exciting, but it would also be very devastating. We could all agree to that. But by its very nature, it would be exciting, right? If a small meteor crashed in my yard, it would be exciting, but not good. So don't misunderstand excitement for, we're going to Disney World. The numbers can be exciting. They get people riled up, and they get people paying attention, but they don't tell us anything about the impacts. The numbers that I'm interested in are how many people are going to be flooded, like we saw with Helene, or how many people are going to have storm surge all up and down a certain coast, like we saw with Helene. So a big part of the talks that I'm going to be giving this year at the various conferences, specifically the National Tropical Weather Conference, are going to be about the impacts and how far away from a hurricane's center, because that's where there's other numbers involved. What are the wind speeds? What's the pressure? Again, those numbers matter, but the bigger numbers are the impacts, and we just don't have a big handle on that. So I think we just got to look at it in a different light. So I'm going to be really emphasizing impacts over numbers, and that's going to start with the seasonal forecast. Yes, we're going to talk about it. I'd be a fool to ignore it, and there's no reason to ignore it. But the seasonal forecast numbers are not the entire story, and it would be a disservice to you to pretend like that they were. Okay, so we're going to talk about it, but we're also going to talk about the impacts, steering patterns, things like that. And then once we do get tropical cyclone activity commencing, tropical depressions, storms, hurricanes, major hurricanes, the whole gamut, then we are going to really focus on impacts more than ever before. We'll talk about the numbers. What's the wind speed? When is it supposed to be here? What are the surge values? But I want to try to start helping people to understand how it could affect them, you. I'll point right at you there. Get a real poke you right in the webcam eye. I'm trying to help you to understand how once we get to hurricane season, the hurricanes can impact you and where you can look up information to help you make decisions based on what data is out there. So that's where we're going to go once we get towards hurricane season now. I don't know, just a little bit over 100 days away, something like that. So sooner rather than later, we're going to have to start thinking about it even more. All right, so there you go. That is it from me for today, and probably in terms of a discussion like this the rest of the week, because Wednesday through Wednesday night, I will be out and about eastern North Carolina, maybe southeast Virginia, covering this latest winter storm, and we shall see what happens together. All right, don't forget, if you're a subscriber on the channel, and I hope you would do it, hit that notification button. You got to be notified when we put a video up, and that's the easiest way to do that. All right, thanks for giving me a part of your day today. I know I went pretty long, but I had a lot to tell you about. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack. Our whole community appreciates you tuning in. I'll talk to you again from out somewhere in eastern North Carolina or southeast Virginia at around midweek.